Welcome to the Dark Knight 30 to 80 Skills Guide. In this guide we'll cover all of your skills as you train to be the edgiest edge, better than the rest of them, but also hopefully kill your enemies along the way. Watch as you go from this to this. This guide is framed in the mindset of players completely new to Final Fantasy XIV or the MMO genre in general. In that same vein, this will merely be an overview of the actions and how to use them. Optimal rotations are better left to their own in-depth videos just due to how much complexity is involved in perfect openers and overall rotations. We will, however, be crafting openers as we go to help new players understand what goes through creating openers and give them a foothold to push themselves into being able to do it on their own. The goal is to draw players in on the ground level so they can make strides to improve themselves. All tooltips will be shown at the level cap for each section. Level 50 for A Realm Reborn, level 60 for Heavensward, 70 for Stormblood, and then finally at level 80 for Shadowbringers. I also recommend all players add Sprint and Limit Break to their hotbars, both found in the General tab of your Actions menu. And as for how my hotbars build, it'll make sense at 80. Just put skills on your hotbars in a way you feel comfortable using as you're leveling. Everyone has their own way of doing things. With that all out of the way, let's begin. To become a Dark Knight, you must first finish the entire A Realm Reborn storyline, ending on the quest Before the Dawn. Accept the first quest of Heavensward, Coming to Ishgard, and you will be allowed to explore Ishgard at your own leisure. Dark Knight's starting quest will be in the Pillars in the northeast at the Tribunal Aetheryte Shard. Any and all other requirements will be merely met just by normally playing the game. Before I get into the toolkit of Dark Knight, know that this is not a tanking basics guide. This is focused on how to use your Dark Knight skills and not the general flow all tanks need to follow. Also, I recommend buying a full set of level 30 tanking gear or leveling one of the A Realm Reborn tanks first to get some gear. In addition to all of your normal skills, you start with a couple of role actions: Rampart, Low Blow, Provoke, Interject, and Reprisal. Make room for these and the other two we will get later. These are important and directly tied with your ability to be a good tank. Check the Tank Role Actions guide in the description if you need an in-depth look at these skills and their uses. We also start with Tank Mastery, which is just making sure you have tank stats. It's a passive trait. Now onto our actual toolkit. We start at level 30, so we have a few to start out with. Level 1, Level 2, and Level 26, Hard Slash, Syphon Strike, and Souleater. This is our basic combo. Always aim to complete your combos where you can. If you've gotten this far without seeing a combo before, a combo attack has a glowing border like shown here. I will not be going over non-comboed potencies as a result. The combo starts with 200 potency Hard Slash, then goes into Syphon Strike for 300 potency. In addition to doing damage, you will regenerate 600 MP on hit. We'll be going over it in a bit, but we do spend MP very quickly, so this is good regeneration. We then finish off with a 400 potency Souleater. This comes with a small 300 potency heal. This is not the same as 300 potency from an actual healer though. Don't rely on it too heavily even in solo content, especially since we'll be looking at our starting AoE next. Level 6, Unleash. In a 5 Yalm AoE around you, you do 150 potency to all enemies hit. On 3 or more enemies, get spamming AoE. On 2 enemies you can alternate hits between them, but 3 or more, AoE for sure. 3 enemies is the barrier to entry for most jobs to AoE, and Dark Knight starts as no exception. Spam Unleash as much as you can on trash mobs. This is especially important because as a tank, it is your job to maintain aggro on all enemies at once. Level 15, Unmend. Unmend is a ranged attack and has a really good range at that, doing 150 potency to the targeted enemy. This is generally how we want to pull enemies, especially bosses. It has an added aggro multiplier too, so it gives us a big aggro lead to start. Typically, bosses start near the edge of boss arenas. Once we get into more traditional bosses, we'll tank them in the middle of the arena. This is the other big use of Unmend, causing the boss to move itself into position. Let's take our fire friend here for example. He starts at the edge, but when we unmend, he moves closer to us. Positioning enemies is a major job of tanks. This makes for a good example of how we'll be using this skill on trash and boss fights going forward. Just be sure to only use it to pull. Mid-battle, this is almost always a bad choice of attack. It breaks combos, and does very little damage overall. Level 10. Grit. A 10-second recast that almost never comes into play. This is our aggro stance. Press the button, and the gem here will begin to glow. That means the stance is on, as well as the buff icon on your FFXIV. Turn this on, and never turn it off outside of 8-man content in higher levels. You are the tank, and this stance multiplies your aggro generation for all of your actions by an extreme degree. There's absolutely no reason not to have this on before 8-man content. In 8-man content, there will be 2 tanks, and in 24-man raids, there will be 3 tanks. In situations where all tanks are fighting the same enemies, one tank will have on their tank stance, and the other tanks will have theirs off. This designates the 2 different states of tanks: main tank and off tank. The main tank is the one in charge of the boss at any given time, while off tanks focus on DPS, pick up the boss if the main tank dies, and will handle additional enemies. There are also sometimes attacks that will specifically target an off tank, or at least the person who is second on the aggro list. The main tank and off tank or tanks can swap multiple times in some fights. I only bring up these level 50 and beyond concepts now because of the part Grit plays. If both tanks keep on their stance at all times, there could be fights for aggro and may cause other players to be killed as a result. So be sure to keep that in mind. When you're the only tank, never take this off. Once you get into content with multiple tanks, be sure to work as a team. Often, whoever turns on their stance first is volunteering to main tank. Level 30, Flood of Darkness. This is the skill the level 30 Intro to Dark Knight gives us. I will not be talking about when a job quest gives a skill from this point on, but I will be denoting it on screen. Do your job quests. Your best skills come from them, and some nice gear too. Anyway, as for Flood of Darkness, it costs 3,000 mana, which is a lot, but it does 250 potency to all enemies in a 10-yalm line in front of you, and is on a non-existent 2-second recast. This is really good damage in AoE. It adds up extremely quickly. Be sure to spam it during trash pulls. Get one out between every unleash. Be sure to use it on bosses too though, just because we have no other use for MP at this point. It also can be weaved between GCDs, so no worrying about your combo breaking. But there's more to this skill too. The additional effect of this is granting 30 seconds onto an additional UI element. The Darkside gauge just exists to keep track of our Darkside timer. While active, we gain plus 10% damage. This is the biggest reason to use Flood of Darkness, even in boss fights. The 250 potency is really good, but an extra 10% damage on top of all attacks is even better. This includes any further uses of Flood of Darkness. The Darkside timer caps at 60 seconds, so you have plenty of time between pulls to get more time banked before it falls off. You really won't be managing the gauge at all though. You can basically ignore the Darkside gauge altogether. Just from fighting, the gauge will maintain itself. Any actual management ends up falling into a min-max context and will not be covered in this guide. Just keep in mind when you graduate to higher level guides. And with that covers everything we start with as a Dark Knight. It's very little, but we'll have a lot more toys to play with soon enough. We don't quite have an opener, but we can open fights with Unmend, then spam our Souleater combo repeatedly, and weaving in Flood of Darkness between GCDs, like shown here. This is a much smoother learning curve than in previous expansions, so hope you're ready for a lot more skills to come. At level 32, we get one of the missing role actions, Arm's Length. Level 35, Blood Weapon. On a 60-second cooldown, we get 10 seconds of MP regen on all of our weapon skills and spells, the only spell currently being Unleash. AoE will not regenerate multiple times, but it will regenerate MP once per hit. Much like Syphon Strike, it is a 600 MP regeneration per hit, and stacks on top of the Syphon Strike regen, causing it to give 1200 mana now. We want to essentially use this on cooldown, when we're not capped on mana. In total, we can get up to 5 GCDs within the window for 3000 mana. We need a decent skill speed amount to get that though, close to a 2.4 global recast. Any higher, and expect only 4 GCDs for 2400 mana. Which, this is still a nice amount of mana. Just be sure to be spending your mana as to not waste any of the regeneration. More MP means more damage. Level 38, Shadow Wall. Our first defensive Dark Knight ability. On a 120-second cooldown, this reduces damage by 30% for 15 seconds. This is a very heavy mitigation tool. Get this out anytime you're taking a lot of damage, especially during trash pools. The cooldown isn't that much longer than Rampart, and it prevents quite a bit more damage. If nothing else, it's powerful against tank busters. Not that you won't be seeing any notable ones for quite a few more levels. Which, a tank buster is any attack that's meant to do heavy damage or bust a tank. Such heavy hits require heavy responses, and Shadow Wall is one of them. Level 40, Edge of Darkness. Similar to Flood of Darkness, costing 3000 mana and on a 2-second recast, also giving 30 seconds onto our Darkside timer, this is our single target version. It does 350 potency of damage to the target. Flood of Darkness is still way better if you're in an AoE situation, but on bosses, Edge of Darkness takes much more priority. It's a good bit of extra damage in any single target situation. Also, while AoE situations usually mean 3 or more enemies, Flood of Darkness is actually stronger than Edge of Darkness on just 2 enemies, breaking the norm. Level 45, Dark Mind. On a short 60-second cooldown, Dark Mind reduces all magic damage by 20% for 10 seconds. This is extremely powerful, but difficult to make use of as a casual player. A lot of trial and raid content leans on the magical side when it comes to boss attacks or tank busters, but trash mobs usually have some physical enemies involved at all times. It is also sometimes not clear what is a magic attack. Some magical looking attacks are actually physical, but in general if it's some kind of breath attack, spell, or other such magical looking effect, Dark Mind will work. If it's a punch of some kind, it's almost always physical, but there are exceptions there too. But in general, this is something you want to be using a lot. The cooldown is tiny, and the effect is strong despite that. Get a feel for the types of attacks enemies do, and the timing of them, and you can make effective use of Dark Mind. At level 48 is our final role action, Shirk. Level 50, Living Dead. On a massive 6-minute cooldown, this is the Dark Knight ultimate ability. In general, this is arguably the worst one, but has some uses even a novice player can get. First, let me explain the effects. Upon using Living Dead, you will gain the Living Dead buff for 10 seconds. During this 10 seconds, you must die to gain the secondary effect, Walking Dead. Instead of death, Walking Dead will leave you with 1 HP and will also last for 10 seconds, regardless of the Living Dead timer. For this 10 seconds, you cannot go below 1 HP, but if Walking Dead's timer runs out, you will instantly die, no matter how much HP you currently have. To prevent this death, you need a healer to heal you for your full HP amount, but you do not need to be healed to max. Let's take a specific example here. My max HP is 48975. Once the Living Dead is triggered, I must be healed for a total of 48975 HP, not hit this maximum value. If I get healed for 25,000 HP in one heal, get dropped down to 1 HP again, then healed for another 25,000 HP, this second heal will cure me of Living Dead. This distinction is important enough to memorize. Now we can get onto the use cases. Obviously, like all tank ultimates, this is to be used on any tank buster that would one-shot the tank unmitigated. This is almost exclusively in extreme fights and savage raids, so you won't use it like this unless you try the harder content the game has to offer. The other use is in emergencies. Maybe the healer died, or you accidentally stood in an AoE or two, dropping to very low on HP. If it's a situation where you accidentally died and got Walking Dead, the healer is very likely going to spam heals on you to recover from such a low health. If you still die, you would have died anyway, but at least you delayed the death for 10 seconds. One final possible use requires some very important communication with your healer. Scholars and astrologers can sometimes struggle to heal the full HP amount of Living Dead, but white mages you can plan out using this as a trash pull skill. White mages have Benediction, which is a full heal. Pulling a ton of enemies at once hurts a lot, but if you're Living Dead, it doesn't matter how much it hurts. You can pull, then right before you die, pop Living Dead. Then before Walking Dead runs out, the white mage can use Benediction on you. Do not expect a healer to know this is your plan on their own, and that's why communication is key. Try to only do this with healer friends you have. Putting this tactic on random healers, especially while you are also inexperienced, can be disastrous. Either way, communication is key to even attempt this strategy. Finally, some attacks will ignore Living and Walking Dead. Mostly these are failed mechanics in trial and raid environments. Was someone supposed to stand in a spot to prevent the entire arena from exploding? This damage will likely go through Living Dead and Walking Dead. Basic AoEs, you can probably face tank those through Walking Dead, but don't risk it. But with that, we finally have caught up to whatever job took you to Heavensward and have hit level 50. We don't really have much new for an opener, but let's do a formal walkthrough for our level 50 opener. Unmend, Hard Slash, Edge of Darkness, Blood Weapon, Syphon Strike, Edge of Darkness, Souleater, Edge of Darkness, Hard Slash, Edge of Darkness, Syphon Strike, Souleater, Edge of Darkness. Then just casually walk through our combos. First, let me note the complete lack of defensive cooldowns in this opener. Because of the nature of defensive cooldowns, you do not want to use them in the same place every time. Some fights have huge bursts of damage early on, but others do not have much happening until maybe a minute in. Blowing all your cooldowns at once is just wasteful. This will hold true for the later rotations I show here. They're purely tuned for offense. Back to this rotation, as mentioned, we want to start with Unmend to position the boss. It also means our global cooldown will be running while we run towards the boss. Once in range, we can start our combo, Hard Slash to start, and we can immediately lead into Edge of Darkness. We make this a double weave here though, adding in Blood Weapon 2 since we have finally uncapped our MP. We can then alternate GCDs and Edge of Darkness until we run out of mana. At this point we have Syphon Strike into Souleater. If we have enough skill speed, we will get in Souleater or under Blood Weapon and we'll get one last Edge of Darkness. If you get this last one, you should end with 0 MP and just have to start cycling through our main rotation. If you didn't, you'll be able to do it after the next Syphon Strike. And one final note, our openers will all work in or out of Grit. Tank stance is not required specifically for our opener. Use this as both the main and off tank. Generally, just be sure you never overcap on mana. It's fine to hit 10,000 mana for a moment, but be sure to spend some soon after so you don't waste any. Passive regeneration and Syphon Strike add up quickly. But overall, not much to deal with. A slow start to help you get into the flow of tanking, but we'll be getting a lot more new toys in due time. Let's check out the Heavensward set. Level 52, Salted Earth. On a 90-second cooldown, we place down a small bubble of damage over time that does 60 potency per hit for 15 seconds. The mere act of placing the bubble also causes damage for 60 potency. Dots tick on the server tick, which is every 3 seconds. As such, the dot will hit 5 times. In total, this is 360 potency. You must manually position the bubble with the mouse and a click, or aiming the camera and pressing X on controller. The uses of this are obvious enough. It's a bubble of a lot of damage so multiple enemies can all be hit with Salted Earth. Use this for trash pulls anytime you can. But of course, damage is damage, so bosses should get a bit of salt too. The big problem with this skill is the fact that it is a placed skill. Using this between GCDs, especially in a double weave like we'll try to do later, it can be a bit messy. As such, keep a normal version on your hotbar for normal placement, but this is one of the few skills in the game I recommend having a macro to place it for. Just be warned that even the best battle macros are pretty bad. Often I have to mash it just to get it to work a single time. The choice is ultimately yours though, whether you learn manual placement or macro placement. Level 54, Plunge. On a short 30-second recast, you jump towards the enemy quickly, doing 200 potency of damage. It's free damage, but the gap close effect is also very nice. Do not use this to pull, ever. It does the exact opposite of Unmend. Unmend allows us to pull the enemy into position, but Plunge puts us right in their face, making any attempts at positioning futile. Try to use this only after the enemies are in position. Additionally, this makes for a very good gap closer for any situations you don't have arm's length for, or use arm's length too late. Gap closes are amazing for negating knockback effects in general, especially ones as fast as Plunge. Also, because of how short the cooldown is, be sure not to forget this in AoE situations either. It's the least important of your attacking abilities, but it's a little bit of extra damage either way. Level 56, Abyssal Drain. On a 60-second recast, this does 200 potency to a targeted enemy, and all enemies within a 5-yard radius of the original target. This also comes with a cure of 200 potency, about a third less than a Souleater heal. And unlike Blood Weapon, this gives health for every additional enemy hit. If you hit 5 enemies, it's 1000 potency of healing. As such, because it's both good damage and a nice little bit of healing, AoE is the absolute best place for this. But again, just like with Salted Earth, short cooldown means use it on single targets too. Don't rely on the healing power either way. It's nice, but it's an additional effect, not the main one. Level 60, Carve and Spit. On a 60-second cooldown, this does 450 potency to a target and gives you 600 mana. This is a huge hit, our biggest one so far. Like previous attacks, it continues to hold true. Short cooldown means use it no matter the situation. As with our other mana regenerations, try to use some mana before using Carve and Spit, or you'll lose out on that extra mana. We make sure to do this exactly in our new opener. There's a lot more to weave in thanks to this skill set. 4 new attacks is quite a bit, and I've reordered a lot of stuff for reasons that will come into play later. Unmend, Hard Slash, Edge of Darkness, Blood Weapon, Syphon Strike, Souleater, Salted Earth, Hard Slash, Edge of Darkness, Syphon Strike, Edge of Darkness, Plunge, Souleater, Edge of Darkness, Carve and Spit, Hard Slash, Edge of Darkness, Abyssal Drain, Syphon Strike, Souleater. So, as before, we start with Unmend to place the boss, and Hard Slash to start out. Then the Edge of Darkness and Blood Weapon to spend MP and start to regain more. Because of this late use, we can do a few GCDs before worrying about mana again. As such, we do 2 more GCDs before worrying about our off globals. This wait time is due to raid buffs. At 60, most jobs will have some form of raid buff or another, so matching this timing benefits us. We start with Salted Earth because it's our strongest OGCD that does not give us more mana. Our mana is close to maxed again, so it's better to not Carve and Spit or roll overcap on mana possibly. This is the start of our OGCD spam section. So then we move into Hard Slash to another Edge of Darkness to start spending our mana again. Syphon Strike will give us some back, so we'll Edge of Darkness again and double weave in a Plunge. We finish our next Souleater combo with another double weave, Edge of Darkness, and Carve and Spit. After one more Hard Slash is our final double weave of Edge of Darkness and Abyssal Drain. From here we just have to continue into our normal GCD rotation. A lot of these weird placements are placeholders for level 80. If we order things like this now, we can build up muscle memory for level 80 and minimize the amount of changes the rotation experiences. But no matter what, we have 20 levels of skills ahead, which will greatly change our rotation and general play of Dark Knight. Starting with Stormblood. Level 62, Blackblood. This is the first trait Dark Knight gets to care about. Our little grit gem has now expanded into a full sword. This is our blood gauge, and despite what the tooltip says, only Souleater gives blood to us at 62, and gives 20 blood at that. We also received a skill to spend this gauge on. Level 62, Bloodspiller. Costing 50 gauge, but acting as a GCD, Bloodspiller is a 600 potency hit on a single target. This is a huge hit. Given that only Souleater gives us blood at the moment, we'll only be using Bloodspiller in single target situations, and it is absolutely worth it. The best and most important part of this skill though, is it does not break combos. You can Hard Slash, Bloodspiller, and then still be able to Syphon Strike. This makes Dark Knight flow extremely well as a result. Pop off Bloodspiller whenever you can. Level 64, Quietus. Similar to Bloodspiller, Quietus costs 50 gauge and does not break combos. This, however, is our AoE gauge spender. In a 5 yalm radius, Quietus does 210 potency to all enemies in a 5 yalm radius around you. On as few as 3 enemies, this is stronger than Bloodspiller. Because of how little blood we generate at this level, I recommend saving gauge for AoE. If you are at 90 or 100 gauge, spend it on Bloodspiller. 80 or below, and the boss is about to die, hold it for the next trash pool. You're very likely going to hit far more than just 3 enemies with Quietus. Even if only 3 enemies, it's a better choice, if only just barely. Level 66, Enhanced Blackblood. This trait directly buffs Blood Weapon. In addition to the MP regen, each GCD under Blood Weapon will grant us 10 blood gauge. Now your reasons to have a high enough skill speed to get 5 attacks under Blood Weapon is extra important. This is an entire Bloodspiller or Quietus on its own, so it's quite worth a lot. Level 68, Delirium. On a 90-second cooldown, this puts us into overdrive. For 10 seconds, or up to 5 attacks with proper skill speed, Quietus and Bloodspiller require no blood to use and regenerate MP. Bloodspiller regenerates 200 MP per attack for 1000 total MP, and Quietus gives a massive 500 MP for 2500 MP total. Obviously, each specific attack should be used in their respective situations. Bloodspiller spam for 1 or 2 targets, and Quietus spam on 3 or more. And because of the potentially higher gains from Quietus, Delirium should definitely be used for trash pulls as much as you can. Level 70, The Blackest Night. This is definitely the defining moment for Dark Knight. Costing 3000 mana and on a short 15-second cooldown, the Blackest Night creates a barrier around you or an ally for 20% of their max HP. This barrier lasts for 7 seconds. 25% max health is a huge barrier of health, but it gets better. If the barrier is completely consumed before the timer runs out, you are given a free use of Edge of Darkness or Flood of Darkness through the gained buff Dark Arts. This has no timer and is displayed as the glowing gold icon on the dark side gauge, so you not only take far less damage, you get the mana spent on the Blackest Night essentially refunded. There is, however, a sliver of a problem here. Bosses that don't do enough damage to break a shield. Depending on your gear level and the content you are doing, a boss can be too weak to break the Blackest Night completely. Boss autos are typically very weak in anything below extreme difficulty. As such, you'll need to time this for tank busters for the most part. In trash pools, just about everything at this level or higher can break the shield, especially if you are pulling multiple groups of enemies. You'll not only make the healer's life easier, but not lose a Flood of Darkness cast. It is a win-win. Putting the Blackest Night on party members is also an extremely good use. If you see that an ally is obviously going to mess up a mechanic, you can Blackest Night them to prevent them from dying. Even if they wouldn't have died, they'd at least take a lot less damage as a result, and spend the entirety of your shield almost guaranteed. So not only did you save an ally, you didn't lose anything in the process, since that mana is refunded in Dark Arts. Once again, a win-win. But not quite so win-win is our next opener. This is going to be an especially weird one. I'm going to go over it first, then explain the issues with it, but you'll probably see the issue immediately. Unmend. The Blackest Night. Blood Weapon. Hard Slash. Edge of Darkness. Syphon Strike. Souleater. Salted Earth. Hard Slash. Edge of Darkness. Delirium. Bloodspiller. Edge of Darkness. Plunge. Bloodspiller. Edge of Darkness. Carve and Spit. Bloodspiller. Edge of Darkness. Abyssal Drain. Bloodspiller. Bloodspiller. Syphon Strike. Souleater. So the biggest problem we have in this opener is the fact that we use the Blackest Night. Remember how I just said some bosses are too weak to break the shield in time if you are too geared? Or maybe even if you aren't geared? In your typical dungeon environment, you may want to do the slightly more inefficient but equal in mana option of moving the first Edge of Darkness to replace the Blackest Night. I will, however, be going over the rest of the opener as normal. Assume we are still using the Blackest Night. So anyway, we use the Blackest Night and Blood Weapon as our first double weave after Unmend for multiple reasons. The Blackest Night will uncap our mana, bringing us down to 7,000, where Blood Weapon being put up will be what helps us regain it. This also gets the cooldown rolling early, meaning more Blood Weapon sooner. Our hard slash starts us off as normal, and we immediately do another Edge of Darkness. Because of Blood Weapon, we'll very quickly recap on mana, so we want to spend even more just to give us a buffer. And even the hardest raid fights will have trouble breaking the shield of the Blackest Night immediately. We don't have to worry about the dark arts preventing the mana expenditure. We keep moving into our first Souleater, which is where things start getting intense. We weave in Salted Earth to get the dot rolling, one more hard slash, and start the big push. We double weave Edge of Darkness and Delirium to spend our dark arts proc and put us into super burst mode. Each of our double weaves are to spend the giant amount of mana we're going to have through this whole section, and use our other off globals. The first is Edge of Darkness and Plunge, getting Plunge's cooldown rolling, then Edge of Darkness and Carve and Spit, now that mana isn't going to be accidentally overcapped. And finally, Edge of Darkness and Abyssal Drain, since Abyssal is our weakest. From this point, we have 2 more Bloodspillers under Delirium before being forced to move back into our normal flow. We should have enough blood gauge for 1 more Bloodspiller, which we can use some point after this image ends. Just be sure not to overcap on blood. We do not do 6 in a row, because if we do, our combo will break, so at least wait until after Syphon Strike to use the next Bloodspiller. This big burst is all perfectly primed under all of the possible raid buffs, just as before. This is a lot to take in at once, but with practice it should become fun and fluid. Ultimately, the key points here are to make the most out of your Delirium and mana. If you mess up the specific order of your off globals, it's okay. Best to use them in a different order than to not use them at all. Get them all out, keep them all on cooldown, and get ready for the big finish in Shadowbringers. Level 72, Stalwart Soul. It took way too long to get this skill. Stalwart Soul is comboed off of Unleash, so now instead of just spamming Unleash over and over for global AoE, we alternate it and Stalwart Soul, which is 160 potency. This is only 10 potency more, however, it restores 600 MP and generates 20 blood gauge, allowing us more Edge of Darkness and Quietus casts. A lot more at that. This heavily boosts our AoE power, and makes it a lot more active and engaging as a result. Level 74, Darkside Mastery, Flood of Shadow, and Edge of Shadow. Darkside Mastery is just the trait to mark the upgrade to Flood of Darkness and Edge of Darkness. Flood of Shadow is a 50 potency increase to 300 potency total, and all the same effects otherwise. Edge of Shadow is a 150 potency increase to 500 potency, with all the same effects. Overall, just a plain potency boost, but it's a really big power boost. Level 76, Dark Missionary. On a 90-second cooldown, you and all allies within 15 yalm radius of you take 10% less magic damage for 15 seconds. This is the raid-wide mitigation skill we want to use anytime we can. By this level, just about every boss in every dungeon while leveling, and beyond, has some form of heavy raid-wide damage. and the vast, overwhelming majority of raid wides are magical. Almost none are physical. So if it's something that will damage the entire party unavoidably, Dark Missionary should go up. Ultimately, trials and raids are where this skill shines most. Sure, dungeon bosses have some painful raid wides, but trials and raids, especially extreme and savage ones, have much stronger raid wides. Timing this with big raid wides as many times as you can through a fight will make whatever you are doing go a lot smoother. Protect your party and help the healers by having them need to heal less. You may even save lives if your party has been collecting vuln stacks. Level 78, Enhanced Plunge. This trait turns Plunge into a skill with charges. Skills with charges have multiple uses stored at once. Upon using a charge, the cooldown of the next charge will begin to tick down. Plunge meanwhile holds a max of 2 charges for a total cooldown of 60 seconds. Each individual charge still only takes 30 seconds. If nothing else, this means we can save 1 charge of Plunge at all times for knockback mechanics and spend the other charge the moment we get it. That is, assuming we don't have arm's length available for the same purpose. Level 80, Living Shadow. On a 120 second cooldown, and at the cost of 50 blood gauge, you summon a Shadow of Frey to your side for 24 seconds. This timer is now an extension of our Darkside gauge. Each of his attacks will be 300 potency, and he will do 7 of them for a total of 2100 potency at a minimum. And yes, that's a minimum, because his AoE attacks act like AoE. The Shadow will do a specific rotation of skills in the following order: Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Quietus, Flood of Shadow, Edge of Shadow, Bloodspiller, Carve and Spit. Get this out every time you can in single target or trash pools. 2100 potency at minimum is huge, and when you factor in 3 of the first 4 attacks are AoE, this balloons by several thousands more in trash pools. Your other blood gauge spenders don't come anywhere close to this in power. Just be sure not to use this towards the end of a fight, since you might waste a good amount of the duration. But we need to get Frey into our opener. This one skill alone is a huge power boost, but it wasn't the only one. Unmend, The Blackest Night, Blood Weapon, Hard Slash, Edge of Shadow, Syphon Strike, Souleater, Living Shadow, Salted Earth, Hard Slash, Edge of Shadow, Delirium, Bloodspiller, Edge of Shadow, Plunge, Bloodspiller, Edge of Shadow, Carve and Spit, Bloodspiller, Edge of Shadow, Abyssal Drain, Bloodspiller, Plunge, Bloodspiller, Syphon Strike, Souleater. As before, I will be going over the Blackest Night opener, but if needed, move the first Edge of Shadow to be in place of the Blackest Night instead. There are 2 changes we have made since level 70. The first change is after our first Souleater. We will now double weave Living Shadow in with Salted Earth. We had this double weave slot free, and Living Shadow works weirdly with raid buffs, compared to all other attacks, so it's good to get it out early. The other is towards the end. Between the 4th and 5th Bloodspillers, we placed our second Plunge. This is why we used the first Plunge when we did in earlier openers, due to the fact that we now have 2 charges. Luckily enough though, these are the only 2 changes from 70, so if you have a handle on your level 70 opener, the level 80 opener is no more difficult to get a handle on. Just remember, this is a general newbie opener, and there's plenty of other options out there, especially in higher end guides. Overall, this is a good start to get you learned. Use stuff essentially off cooldown, and as you get mana, and you'll be putting out a nice amount of damage, and be more than just a sack of meat for enemies to try and murder. You really can cut with all that edge. Thank you for watching my Dark Knight 30 to 80 skills guide. Feel free to give feedback or ask questions on what might still be confusing to you. My goal is to help players improve in whatever ways I can. Take care, and have fun in your adventures across Eorzea. May the power of an Nidhogg's lay waste to your enemies.